Hi, I'm Andrew Berry and welcome to At the Bench and welcome to a brand new series of films. We're going to be looking at top 10s. We're going to be running these few films throughout the whole year, and the reason why I thought it'd be a good idea to produce a top 10 films is the fact that I do get lots of comments about the tools that we use, and I get asked questions so like, what's your favorite tool, what's the best type of brush to use, buff sticks, and all these sorts of questions. And I thought it'd be a good idea to put together this film, this particular one, on the bench. Okay, top 10 things you need on the bench, the top 10 tools, the top 10 bench tools. That's what I was meant to say. And we're going to be looking at it in no real particular order, my 10 favorite items to have on the bench. When it comes to products, you see it in the tool catalogs. You can see pages and pages and pages of, in theory, the same item, the same pliers, the same polish, the same brushes, but out of the myriad that are displayed in front of you, which ones are the best, which ones should we not buy, which ones should we buy, which ones get the best results the quickest. So I'm just going to put together my top 10 of bench tools. So at number 10, we are simply looking at buff sticks. As I said, no particular order. Buff sticks. Make these up, have a few by the side of you. These are very simple pieces of rectangular wood, roughly around about 25 millimeters, an inch by about half an inch, 10 millimeter, and a round one that's about 10 millimeter in diameter. And use the same grit, use a 600 grit, and just wrap 3 or 4 of these, have them by the side of your bench. As soon as, it's got straight hair, as soon as the one surface starts to wear, you rip the end off, you have a nice freshly exposed, nice rough piece, but you still got that lovely smooth section on the other side until that wears out, and then you rip off that section, and so on all the way around. Likewise with your round buff stick. Use that one until it wears off, rip a bit off, rip off the strip, put it in your recycling, your reclamation bag, and you've got a fresh piece of emery paper. As I said, don't buy various grits, don't buy sort of 80 grit, 160, 320, 640, whatever. Just buy one wet and dry paper, 600 grit, make up 3 or 4 of these, jobs are good, and you'll be set for life. At number 9, how about a ring file? I don't have room on my bench up here. I don't have room necessarily downstairs in my workshop downstairs to have a number of files. Okay, I don't have enough space to put a round file, a pillar file, and all those other myriads of files that have fancy names. The one file that we use all the time is called a ring file. Okay, so a ring file will have a flat surface on the top here, but it's nicely rounded on the back, which means if you're working with a ring, for instance, you can come along and use the inside, the rounded part of the ring file to do the inside of the ring, and without having to take your hand off the file, put your file down, or put your file down, take your hand off the file, pick up a new file, come along. You can simply turn the file over and work with the flat side onto the ring. Saves a lot of time, saves a lot of hassle. So, ring file on a decent handle, make sure you get that absolutely straight, but that one isn't. And again, that is all you really, really need. At number 8, a ring clamp. Now, a ring clamp does not have to be solely used for rings. It is an ideal little vise that you can hold in your hand to hold small pieces. You can hold rectangular sections of metal in it if you want to file it or drill it in case you accidentally drill your fingers. And you know, I always keep saying on At the Bench on the films that I love these ring clamps that have the wedge that goes into it. I find these are the best because you can push the wedge up from the bottom, you can hold it in your hand, no problem at all. You can turn it around if you want a flat edge to it. This one I've put a little groove around the outside, about 8mm down from the top, because that then locates into my V, my cutout of my peg, to hold that nice and steady. That's my favourite. You can get other ones with these little wing nuts that come on the side. I don't tend to have these because the wing nut does get in the way, and that's an inside ring clamp, so that's no good for holding other sorts of items. Anyway, so there we go. At number 7, we've got parallel pliers. Now, you've got your round nose pliers, snipe nose pliers, chain pliers, half round pliers, flat pliers, and they're great. And everyone needs those. But not an awful lot of people are aware of parallel pliers. The problem that you've got if you use a normal pair of pliers, say for instance these pliers here, simple flat nose pliers, there's a joint, isn't there, roughly around about a quarter of the way down the length. And I hope you've got box joint pliers, because they are the best type of pliers. Don't buy a lap joint, really cheap and will really wear. So box joint pliers, because there's a pivot point down here, it means these jaws are never parallel, okay? So they're always in this sort of plane. So say you want to hold something that is flat. And I'm using my, this is huge now, okay? So the idea is you have a piece of flat metal in between a pair of jaws, okay? So the jaws are down here. The problem is you've got a point of contact down at the very bottom, but there's nothing holding the metal up here, okay? So these are the jaws of the pliers, this is my metal, okay? So this piece of metal can move around, and it's never held nicely. It's always held at one point of contact, and no matter how hard you push, the end of the jaws will never hold onto that item. This is where parallel pliers really come into their own. These are a small pair. These are a pair of snipe nose. The ends come to a nice fine taper, but you can buy larger ones that have jaws very similar to the flat nose pliers. And as the name implies, the jaws always stay parallel, which means that when you want to hold something rectangular, okay, yes, there is a joint, isn't there? Roughly around about, again, about a quarter of the way down. But the construction means no matter how wide the jaws are opened, the jaws will always stay parallel. Okay, they'll never do this. They'll always stay parallel, which means you want to hold a flat piece of metal in a pair of parallel pliers. Because the jaws are parallel, they will put an even amount of pressure across the whole item that you want to hold. Okay, so this is the item, my block here, and the jaws are always flat against that item, and you get a better grip if you want to hold them, whether you want to use it to hold them for filing or for holding it for drilling or just for squeezing something together, because there's nothing that will cause the piece to fly out as those normal pliers would. So parallel pliers are my number 7. At number 6, how about an Divisor? Okay, simple little headband magnification on the front. I know a lot of you will be saying, but my eyesight's perfect. I can see fine, everything is in focus. That's fine. I'm not saying if you have bad eyesight, you've got to wear one or whatever. I am just saying that if you can produce work, that once you are wearing this, you can produce work to the quality that it is perfect through these magnifications. When the client sees the pieces with their normal eyesight, it's going to look absolutely stunning. I always say that when my students come here, when we teach them on a lovely one-to-one basis, I say, do you want to use the Divisor? And they say, oh no, that's fine, I can see what I'm doing. But I say, no, just try it. Put it upon your head, bring it down, have a look. And the majority of people absolutely love it. They can see so clearly, they can see in close up They don't have to strain their eyesight. So an Optivisor, this one is a number 4. We've got various ones downstairs. We've got number 4, number 5, number 7. They all come with different magnifications. The stronger the magnification though, the narrower the depth of field and the closer you have to be to the job that you're working on. So we've got a number 7 downstairs, but the problem is with the number 7, especially if you're sawing, you have to go that close that as you're sawing, the saw is hitting you in the head or hitting you in the Optivisor. So a number 7 for me is a little bit too powerful. A number 4 for me is just right. So at number 6, an Optivisor. A piece of equipment that you don't often see, and this is number 5, is these little felt pads, okay? These little felt pads. You will never see them on the films that we do on At the Bench, but these little pads, and I made these must be over 20 years ago. These are small little rectangular pieces of hardboard. What size is that? 8 inches by 12 inches. I don't know why, perhaps that's all I had at the time. But I made about 4 or 5 of these. And I have put on here 3 or 4 layers of felt and then put another layer of felt, this is simple black felt over the top. I've just simply stuck it underneath. They're slightly absorbent. And the whole idea is, now this is a little sort of technique that I picked up from a jeweler that I worked with many, many years ago when I just came out of college first. When you're repairing some jewellery, when you repair, you don't necessarily do one repair and then clean it up, ultrasonic it, put it back in the packet. Pick up another repair, take the job out the packet, repair it, clean it, ultrasonic it. You don't work singly. You work in perhaps all the chains at the same time or all rings at the same time. And this is where these pads really come in handy. They're slightly absorbent, which is great because when you work on a piece, you put it in the water, you put it in the acid, put it in the acid, put it in the water, and then have a look at it, you lay it on the pad, the piece will absorb, the felt will absorb the moisture, and you can lay the items out. So when you go to polish, you simply pick up the pad, go over to your polishing motor, put it on the top or by the side of your polishing motor, and work through and putting things in sort of positions as we've got it here. So chains or bracelets, rings, we would stack up something similar to this by the side here. And everything gets laid out. You can see exactly what you're working on and everything should be laid out, not necessarily in this way, but laid out on the pad so you can see what you're working at. And that always sits by the side of us, not necessarily up here, but down in the workshop where we do all the repairs. Or even if you're not necessarily doing repairs and you're working on perhaps a small little production line, you're doing 3s and 4s and 6s of things, and you have the shanks, you lay the shanks out on the pad, and perhaps those shanks have bezel settings, and you can lay the bezel settings out corresponding to its shank, making necklaces or pendants. You can lay everything out on the pad, and it's all contained on this pad. You haven't got them on the bench where you've got to pick them each one up to go and polish. They're on the pad, walk over to your polishing motor, ultrasonic, from the ultrasonic, back at your desk, it's all laid out, you know exactly what you've got, everything is in clear sight. So that's number 5. At number 4, a piercing saw. Yeah, I know everybody should have a piercing saw. And my piercing saw here, this is something that I bought when I was 18 years old. I bought this when I started university, and yes, it is a fantastic saw. I don't mind this saw. This saw has sawn many pieces of metal and I've been very, very happy with it. But I do like these new concept saws. Not everyone can get on with them. It's like Marmite, you either love it or you hate it. These saws for me are really, really comfy. They are nice and lightweight. You don't often break a blade because this part of the frame here never flexes, it always stays nice and stiff. You can change the blades quite often. I've heard a lot of people say, well, all the dust or the lemon, the filings gets trapped in the little holes in the bottom. Well, to be honest, I've had this for going on 4 years and I use this every single day and I don't get anything trapped in the little hole. And if you did, just get it undo the little nuts that we got here and clean it out. It's not a problem. For me, I love these new concept saws. We pierce an awful lot, we cut out, we do lovely delicate filigree work as well, and little cutouts. And I find for me, this type of piercing saw is an absolute godsend. My shoulders don't ache anymore when I'm repeatedly moving the saw up and down, and I love it. So that's my new concepts saw at number 4. And at number 3, we are in the top 3 now. And again, it's a tool that really everyone should have. And if you ask me, you can't have too many. And they are tweezers. Okay? You can have one pair of tweezers. That's not a problem. But do you know what? When you're working away and you're working perhaps to a deadline, or you've got a train of thought and you don't want it spoiled, and you're working away with a pair of tweezers and you realize that, oh, yesterday you used those tweezers to undo a little screw, or you tried to prise something out, and the tips of the tweezers you haven't looked after and they're really worn and they're bent, and you go to pick up a stone, and you can't. Okay, you have one pair of tweezers, you got to stop, you got to play around with them and get the points looking just right. If you have 3, 4, 5 pairs of tweezers, you can simply put them back down. You can pick up another fresh pair and work away, knowing that you've at least got one pair of tweezers that you can work with. These are, what size are these? I've no idea. I think these were AA. They came to a nice fine point. Always make sure that at the end of every day that you really do look after your tweezers. Make sure the points all come nicely. Make sure the points all come down so they meet right at the tip, not like this pair where one little tip goes to one side. So I need to have a bit of work and spend a bit of time fixing these. So tweezers are my number 3. You can't have too many pairs. So go and buy yourself a few, keep them all to one side. As you use them, you'll find that some will feel better, some will have the nice springiness that you can just get used to. Some you may feel that you don't want a very sharp point onto the end. You may want a bit of a short, stubby, stronger end. You may find that you want them quite flat across the top or rounded. But by having these number of tweezers, you can play around just to have a few that will be adapted to the various needs of the pieces that you're actually constructing on your bench. So that's my number 3. Number 2, and again I've demonstrated this particular tool at the bench, and I think many years ago I showed you how to make it, and you use it quite often, not necessarily every single day, but something that you use if you are perhaps filing some metal quite close to a stone, or you wanted to file a piece of metal right next to another piece of metal and didn't want to damage the piece of metal that you didn't want to damage, but you wanted to file the piece of metal that you wanted to file. That all makes sense. So we have got a triangular needle file. This is quite a fine cut needle file, this particular one, because we use this one for trimming claws or prongs, as you American guys call them. And it's a safety file. So what does that mean? It means that on a normal file, it's triangular or a square file. And where the corners come, you've got that sharp edge. Now, normally there's teeth along that sharp edge. And I've got needle files in here that I've got those on, and that is absolutely fine. But this is a safety edged file, which means that I have removed the teeth from, in this instance, a triangular file, those 3 edges. So it doesn't cut on the edge, it only cuts across the face of the actual file, which means that I can run the edge of this needle file against another piece of metal and it won't damage, it won't file into that piece of metal. If I'm using this just to clean up the tips on some diamonds, being very careful of course, I can run the one edge against the diamond knowing there's no teeth, and the actual file will just run over the surface, which allows me then to get right down next to the claw that is touching the diamond to get that nice and smooth. You can use it for trimming up bezels as well. You can even run that safety edge along the stone, along the top of the stone, and you can file the edge, the top edge of the bezel. If there was teeth on it, those teeth are going to be sharp and they could easily chip or mark a stone that you're resting up against, or even marking the metal alongside that you don't need marked and perhaps you've just polished it. So this is a triangular needle file, does the same job with the square one. This is a safety edge. And how do you remove those teeth? Good question. I have an Arkansas or a whetstone, something that we would sharpen our gravers on, put a bit of oil on it and rub the edge of that file, the 3 edges, on that oil stone, and that'll remove the teeth and also perhaps impart a little bit of a polish on the edge, which won't necessarily mark the metal or mark the stone. And that's how you would remove those teeth off the edges. And that's my triangular safety file. Number 1, have you guessed what my number 1 top tool is on the bench? It is, a couple of you have got that right, it is a white nylon bristle brush. Bristle brush, you can call it a bristle brush, white nylon brushes. These, I've always said I love these, and if I was on a desert island with a couple of tools, all I would have is a pendant motor, if I had electricity, and a nice supply of these white bristle brushes. You've seen me use them on at the bench. The majority of times you see me use them, they are black. Well, they've got one in there already. Because I've used them with Tripoli or Menzurna polish. Okay, so this is a brand new one, and this is one that's been used for a few days. And you can see the difference. The bristles, yes, they do get smaller as you use them because they wear away, and it turns black because that is the polish that we use. We use a Tripoli polish up here. White nylon brushes, absolutely brilliant. They get into the nooks and the crannies. I'm doing a particular job at the moment. I have to get right into the inside edge of this particular ring. A normal polishing mop won't do it. A normal polishing mop will just polish the surface. The bristle brush, as you push down, the bristles will come out and they'll splay out slightly, which means that you can get into all the little nooks and crannies. You can get underneath settings. You are going to be soldering some balls onto a ring. The bristle brush will be able to get underneath those balls. Really good. I buy them in about a dozen at a time, or even 2 dozen at a time. We use them all the time. You can buy other types of brushes, bristle brushes, goat's hair brushes, black bristle brushes as well. They are all fine. If you get on with them, that's fine. I find that the white nylon brushes are the best. They don't shed. We used to have goat's hair. And if you have the speed on the pendant motor too much, the bristles will go everywhere, and we were forever sort of taking little bits of hair out of our tops, out of our shirts and our, not waistcoats, what are these, that's very posh waistcoats, aprons, because the bristles just shed. So we moved on to the white nylon brushes and we haven't looked back. So I know I said there was no particular order, but my number 1 top tool for the bench work is a white nylon brush. Cheap as chips. This is a particular one. This is about, what's that, 17, 20 millimeters in diameter, something like that. They're about 70 pence, perhaps about $1 in America. Absolutely brilliant. We've got loads of them. You use them until literally the bristles wear out, until you're virtually down to that metal ferrule that's holding all those bristles together. Once you've used them, pop them into your reclamation sack, and there's a little bit of gold, a little bit of precious metals in those bristles that are left, and you'll get some money for it. So there we go. My number 1 top tool for the bench, white bristle brush. So I hope you've enjoyed my top 10. We're going to be looking at another top 10 on workshop equipment. So we'll be going downstairs for that one. My sort of top 10 tools that we use every single day in the workshop, and that covers all aspects from making jewellery, repairing jewellery, not necessarily, won't be designing it with workshop equipment, but we're going to be looking at electrical and larger pieces of equipment in our next top 10. I'm Andrew Berry. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.